My number
Yes.
one like about this movie is the quote bones fart kick.
Yes. That's a great way to
Yep.
put it.
Yeah.
It'll now be known as the Bones Fart Kick.
100%.
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Be afraid. Be very
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Here's Johnny.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie,
And Nikisha.
where we share our love for spooky spook things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
I feel like I hadn't done that in a while, so I just wanted to throw air horns out there for you guys today.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Get
Sounds like
super
Moulin
It's a
Rouge.
party.
Like Moulin
Oh,
Rouge.
God.
Because you can.
Good. Well, we can talk about Renfield because that is what we are discussing today, the 2023 comedy horror film. Woohoo! So this particular movie, Renfield, was directed and produced by one Chris McKay, and it was written by Ryan Ridley. Of course, it was inspired by the characters from the novel Dracula, and this movie stars Nicholas Hoult, Awkwafina. Oh my God, it's John Ralphio, guys. That's short. Adrian Martinez, Shore Akdashlu, and Nicolas Cage as the titular character, Dracula. Woo, 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 woo. Such a fun time. Which is so funny because I've been seeing on TikTok since Renfield, or even when the previews were coming out, of Nicolas Cage in another movie, I guess from the 80s or 90s, that he was a vampire or dressed up as a vampire or something. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Have y'all seen that? There was another like
Vampire's Kiss or something.
maybe, yeah.
Another Nick Cage vampire movie.
Right.
Bit.
Which I've never seen. Did y'all have?
I've never seen it either.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen. Wait, which one?
Vampire Kiss.
Yeah.
I've never seen Vampire Kiss.
Vampire's Kiss.
I've never seen Vampire's Kiss.
Yeah. Well, apparently he's had extensive training in being a vampire. So this
apparently
was just
there's like really wild scenes in this movie. In that one.
In the Vampire's Kiss?
Like Nick Cage like being like top Nick Cagey.
I love it. Here for it always. It's, it's a part of him. It is who he is. And we have all just learned to accept how campy that can be. So I'm here for it. All things Nicolas Cage. So before we get into everything that is Renfield, producer Brian, do you have some words for us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Producer Brian here. Thank you for listening. And if you are watching us on YouTube, hi, YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. You can follow us elsewhere on social media like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at Talk Horror Pod. So follow us there.
Follow us there.
Do it.
And also watch us on the YouTube so that you can see Jamie winking at you. She loves the wink. Beautiful gowns. Okay, so obviously heavy spoilers for Renfield and maybe some talk about the actual Dracula novel because, I haven't read it, but maybe you guys have. You want to share some insight on how this all connects with this Renfield. So spoilers for that. And Jamie, tell us all about those trigger warnings because it's a little gruesome.
It is pretty gruesome. There's quite a lot of insides on the outside. This is a vampire movie. This is a Dracula movie. So there is a lot of blood.
Lots of it.
A lot of it everywhere, constantly just showering from the rooftops. Lots of limbs, being ripped off, being used then later as weapons. Heads exploding, eyes exploding, lots of explosions related to body parts and dismemberments and attacks and things like that.
Fair.
Lots of vulnerable populations being attacked.
Yes. when we'll get all into that because I'm so excited to hear your thoughts on that particular vulnerable group and those group therapy sessions. So, what else have you guys watched this week, guys? Before we talk about Renfield, I heard you guys watched a couple of movies.
Yeah, we watched two found footage movies that were
Ooh.
kind of subpar,
Oh
but
no.
we watched Afflicted.
Afflicted.
Afflicted is a 2013 found footage movie about two guys who are going on a trip around the world, and then once they get to Paris, something happens where one of them gets sick and chaos ensues. Um, that started off really great and then kind of just became a movie we'd seen before.
Mm,
It was really well made, like really well made. But then it just became wildly predictable, and the characters' choices became um, not even believable for stupid choices, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Mm.
for sure. For sure.
And Jamie, what did you think about Afflicted?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that like I was like verbally complaining while watching it. Just, you know, I don't like it when people are like, "Are you okay?" When people are clearly not okay. Like that's not a
Yeah.
helpful. It's not helpful, and they're doing it
For the
constantly. And
ass.
I'm like, you should stop asking. He's not okay.
He is
No one
not
is
okay.
okay.
Yes.
Um, so that was fine. That
Okay.
was. I know we're like being down on it a little bit, but it was really well made, and we had a good time for less than an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like not bad, but not great. And then we heard that Horror in the High Desert 2, which recently came out, got really good like fun reviews. So
Mm,
we decided to watch Horror in the High Desert, the first one, which came out I believe in 2021.
okay.
Um, it was filmed during the pandemic, but it's basically like a horror documentary, a fake horror documentary, talking about like the disappearance of this person who went hiking into the Nevada desert and was never heard from again. And the
Mm,
whole movie feels like a Dateline movie where it's recounting what happened from everybody, their feelings. They're trying to create a mystery, and then you know you go through kind of what happened. Um, to be totally honest, it was pretty boring. Uh,
oh,
the last 10 minutes are really fun, but last 10 minutes does not a movie make.
yes.
Um, uh, and you know, for better, um, it felt like a Dateline show because they keep repeating all the same exposition. They're trying to build all of this tension, but like in the end, I don't really care. Even though the acting was very good, I feel like there
Hmm.
could be really bad acting in like serious mockumentaries, if that makes sense. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this was totally believable. You kind of hated some of the characters, but they felt like real people who would act that way in certain situations. Uh,
Okay.
however, like we kept pausing it, and we were just like, we're an hour in and nothing has happened. You know, I
Oh,
think they thought they were building tension better than they actually were. My
mm-hmm.
suggestion is I wish they had restructured the movie. I wish that minor spoilers, not crazy spoilers. At the end of the movie, they discover his video footage. So we get to watch what happens to him, and it's kind of freaky deaky. And that 10 minutes is great.
Mm,
However, we don't know that that's coming the whole time. I wish that the
yes.
movie had started setting up the expectation that we found the footage. And then you go back and this is what happened. And then you build the tension to like what happened? How did we get here? What's the myth of the person? All of this stuff. Well, oh, we discovered this, we discovered that. Like, and then you get to the footage. I feel like that would have absolutely built me to that moment. But this one was just like, oh my gosh, just get there already. Stop talking. Like
Yeah,
it was.
I was like having Brian clock. I was like, pause it. What's the time? How have we still not gotten to like what like I get it. Like they set the scene really well, but then they just kept setting the scene, and I was like, I'm no longer engaged because like
Oh,
I understand what you're trying to do, but then it just feels like I might as well be watching like a Dateline special. Like I might as well be watching like a true crime, like 1 hour thing unfold.
right, right. Instead of just like anticipating and like something is gonna happen, but is it gonna happen? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just slow. It wasn't a slow burn, if that makes sense.
For
Mm-hmm.
sure, for sure.
But we watched Afflicted. If you are interested, we watched Afflicted on Showtime. I think it's also on Paramount Plus. And we watched
Mm,
Horror in the High Desert on Tubi. And Horror in the High
yes.
Desert 2 is also on Tubi. I'm probably gonna watch it at some point. Jamie's more than welcome to join me if she wants to put up. But it's also the first one is an hour and a half ish. The second one's like an hour and 15 minutes. So like these are like
Mm.
these aren't long, but the first one did feel a bit long because
Oh
we
my
didn't go anywhere.
gosh.
But yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah, let us know if you continue on in that journey how it goes. But Jamie seems like she's okay with what she saw and doesn't need to see anymore.
We'll see.
Wonderful. Well, let's get into it, guys, because I'm really curious to hear what you guys think of Renfield. But before that, we need to have a 2-minute plot summary.
What's the plot?
And Jamie is feeling a little under the weather. So I volunteer Brian because I did it last time.
Oh wow! I thought you were gonna.
Wow,
No.
you.
I honestly
Brian-
thought you were
Brian
gonna say.
got.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say I just saw it, so I'll do it. But yeah, I guess I'll do it.
No.
Okay. So yeah, someone time me. Let's do 2 minutes on
let
Renfield.
Let me get my not
Not calculated.
whatever. Yeah, my not calculator. All right, producer Brian, you
Woohoo.
have 2 minutes on the clock to tell us everything about this week's film, Renfield. Are you ready?
Sure.
And go.
Okay, so Renfield starts kind of with a flashback of how he became the servant to Dracula in black and white, on kind of an ode to the old Universal horror movies, which was awesome. Then we kind of end up in contemporary New Orleans. Dracula has been decimated by light, so he's trying to rebuild his energy, and Renfield, played by Nicholas Hoult, is his servant, bringing him blood to eat. Renfield feels awful after all of these years of bringing him like innocent people. So what he's decided to do is he's joined a codependency group that where he kind of finds out who the evil codependent is, and that's who he feeds to Dracula. So that kind of makes him feel a little bit better. But then Renfield gets caught up in the local kind of gang drug situation where he doesn't really know, like he just lots of crazy things start happening, and then he meets a cop who he is really inspired by, played by Awkwafina, who really stands up for what she believes in. They save each other from multiple situations. There's a B plot line where Awkwafina's father was killed by this mafia group. That's where John Raffio is, and essentially Dracula decides that he gets to full health and he really wants to become like leader of the world and take over the world. So he joins the mafia group, and then Awkwafina and Nicholas Hoult as Renfield, who has learned to kind of be more independent through Awkwafina and through his codependency group, have to take out Dracula, and they do. And there's a lot of other things that happen thematically in terms of codependency and toxic relationships, but that's basically Renfield, and it's super bloody and fun.
And that's the plot.
Woohoo! Great job.
I think that was right?
Absolutely. Yes. That's all. I mean, that's all that happened in it. So, let's get into it with our first segment of likes and gripes.
And now our likes and gripes.
So I'll start with this, just because I want to piggyback off of what Ryan.
You don't have to do the plot synopsis, but you can just start. Oh, I see it.
I mean, it was because I will redeem myself for my last plot summary one of these days, but today is not the day for that.
Fair,
Give
fair,
it to
fair.
Brian. Beautiful. But I wanted to just piggyback off of Brian with the black and white flashbacks because I really did enjoy that kind of synopsis of how we got to where we are now. And it made me curious to actually go back and either read the book or watch, movies of Dracula just to see how that all played out. Because I realized that I don't really know the story of Dracula and Renfield, and so it was really fun to kind of have that synopsis in there, just so that you know where we are in the
Sure.
moment. And I thought it was cool that it was in the black and white because it was something that happened so long ago, and he has lived many, many lives and many, many of years, and now we're in the modern New Orleans. So I thought that was very fitting. I love the idea too of Renfield trying to find the abusers to feed because it makes him feel like he's, not such a terrible person by being, the liege, I guess, of this crazy person. So I really thought that was cool. Love that John Ralphio was in this, and that was a nice surprise because I want to say I did not see him in any of the trailers or anything. Did you guys know that he was in this movie?
I did because
Okay.
I've been doing all the trailer reactions on TikTok.
Gotcha.
But I will be totally honest, I forgot. So when he showed up in the
Right.
movie, I was like, "Oh, John Ralphio."
Which is so good. I mean, I am a Parks and Recs girl until I die. So that in the movie theater, I actually probably audibly gasped when I saw.
Wait, Nikisha,
Yeah.
do you prefer Parks and Rec over The Office?
Every day, all day, we'll die on that hill.
Me too.
Yes.
Wow, guys,
Me
we
too.
don't
Yes.
need to get into why you're wrong, but like whatever.
Listen, I've tried with The Office, but we won't get into it because that's a whole nother discussion. But
Fair,
yes, I'm a
fair.
Parks and Rec
That's a whole different
girl.
podcast.
That's a
Same.
whole different podcast.
Agreed,
That could
agreed.
last
Wow.
many hours.
Wow, I just got really overwhelmed with the idea of that type of a podcast.
Yes.
How do you even begin? Like,
How?
wow.
But
how-
we can't.
No, we can't, sorry.
Back
Back to Renfield.
to Renfield. Yeah, so I thought the makeup in this was super great, and all of the blood and, like Jamie said, with the trigger warnings, the limbs being used to hurt people. I thought that the fight scenes were really cool, and this movie seemed had more action sequences than I would have thought. I will say when I got into the theater, I didn't know really what to expect other than that this was just going to be a comedy. But I really enjoyed all of the action scenes more than anything else, like all the fight scenes in the apartment complex and all the, Charlie's Angels, Matrix slow motion stuff in the restaurant fight scene was really cool as well. And another thing I really did enjoy was Dracula's monologue of saying he was the victim, because I feel like, and we'll get into this with In Brains, that people do have kind of that mindset of, turning things around on people, especially as the movie has said, Dracula is a narcissist, which I think is so funny in itself to place a label on this magical being
Sure.
as still being having a human quality of being a narcissist. So I thought that was just hilarious and fun to navigate that through the story. The X-ray kick. When Ben Shapiro is like,
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yeah, that's my
Probably
number one like
laughing.
about this movie. Just to piggyback off of that, my number
Yes.
one like about this movie is the quote bones fart kick.
Yes. That's a great way
Yep.
to put it.
Yeah.
It'll now be known as the Bones Fart Kick.
100%.
Yes. I also did have a question because, again, me not being familiar with the story of Dracula, is it a thing that he has to be welcomed in to walk into a space?
Yes, that's
Because-
a vampire
okay.
thing. You have to
Oh,
be
it's a vampire
invited.
thing.
Yeah. Which another like of mine, just because you mentioned it, is
Yep.
the welcome mat that said "Welcome, come in"
Yes.
was truly. I doubled over in laughter during the movie for sure.
Genius. I mean, I'm just saying, Twilight didn't give me these rules, so I don't know. That's the only
Twilight
vampire.
changed the rules.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would argue that Twilight is a
Outlier.
as an outlier of basic vampire rules. It's garlic,
Gotcha.
steaks, like not like
Yes.
delicious steaks, but like in your heart.
In the heart, yeah.
Yeah, you have to be in
Sunlight.
sunlight. You have to be invited
Yes.
in.
Uh-huh.
You don't see yourself in reflections. Sometimes you don't see yourself in pictures and stuff like that, but definitely reflections. That's just like high level stuff. Just in general. If you, Nikisha, I think you would really, if we get into Parks and Rec and stuff, I actually
Yeah,
think that you would, pun intended, die over what we do in the shadows.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Yes. Okay. I have to look into that. I mean, it always comes up like on my little streaming service, but I'll look into watching that.
It's a
It seems
perfect
like a fun
half
time.
hour before you go to bed type of thing where you can giggle a little
Love
bit
it.
and then go to sleep, where it's not like heavy brain work, but it's
Mhm.
spooky, it's funny, it's clever. You really fall in love with the characters, and it's vampire stuff. So yeah.
We love a vampire. Yeah, and just to wrap up my likes and gripes for this, when they used Dracula's blood to revive all the people in the therapy group, someone in the theater audibly just yelled, "What?" And I thought that was the funniest thing because we were all thinking it. I mean, when it came back to the scene and they're all just sitting there, and I'm thinking, they all got ripped apart.
Oh my god, I was so sad during that sequence. I was like, I like these people.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it was just such a shock to just see them, and because you really are thinking like, how did you make all of this work? But it was just so funny that someone shared the sentiment out loud because we all were like, yeah, girl, same. What just happened? But overall the movie, I mean, it was good. It was okay. I don't think I had huge expectations of what it was going to be. Especially because the trailer pretty much gave you like an idea of what the movie was going to be about in general, sprinkled in with some extra, therapy stuff, which was nice so that we could have a discussion about it.
This was like a perfect talking horror movie in general.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. But if it was just a movie, it wouldn't be a movie that I would go and see again. Like it's basically like a one and done for me. And because as much as I loved the gore, and it felt more actiony than horror in a lot of ways, just because of how the action sequences are set up, which I did enjoy. But then it's not like a horror to me. It was just like a nice action movie that was cool to watch, and it was fun and funny. And but yeah, it's like Brian, like you said, Brian, it's definitely a good talking horror movie. But for me, it was just like, okay, it's cool. Jamie, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with like a lot of what you said. I'm actually going to start with the thing you said at the end about the trailer as like a gripe that I have. Like I'm so tired of these trailers spoiling movies, especially some of the best lines from movies. Like even though I will say I still laughed out loud at that line at the self-help group.
Yeah.
Where he's like, yeah, don't let him grow the full power. Oh my God, that's so weird. Why'd you say it like that? It's still the funniest line in this movie. Even just saying it, you're all laughing.
Yeah.
For those that aren't watching us on YouTube, you're all laughing. It's funny. But like, you don't need to use your best material in the trailer. You don't need to reveal so much in the trailer. It's just I don't understand why in the year of Beyonce 2023, we're still putting so much in the trailers. So that was a huge con for me. The other things that we got that like were surprising, like I agree with the beginning, the synopsis, but I think also I also realized that like I'm really similarly unfamiliar with the dark universe, the Universal monster like, history, and a lot of those older like Dracula films and things like that. But I like that, for folks that I'm sure are mega Dracula fans, that they like got a taste for that at the beginning of this film. But more importantly, which is what I think the point of this movie is like you get their relationship at the beginning of the film, which is what I would have wanted more of from this movie. Like this movie's called Renfield. I otherwise like am not really going to care about this person Renfield. But every single scene with Renfield and Dracula together is excellent. And I
Yeah.
just think that both Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage have great chemistry with one another. That was a huge like that I had. It's just like they're riffing off of each other really well. I mean, we can go way more into Nicolas Cage in this film. He's excellent as Dracula, like truly a top performance in my opinion from Nick Cage, but like he just eats up this role, for lack of a non-pun.
Yes.
But like every scene where like his skin's falling apart and like, oh my God, it's just like the makeup, but like it's really him. Like he is doing such an excellent job. But then when they are together, there is movie magic happening. And I really wish that there was way more of them together versus Nicholas Hoult and Awkwafina together, who have zero chemistry. And I'm sure Brian will get into this with his gripes. I don't want to steal his thunder.
No, it's okay.
But like there was like 20 different movie ideas that I feel like they left some of the seeds left over from that they did not continue with, that it just didn't make sense. Like there didn't need to be a love story between Nicholas Hoult and Awkwafina, which they then completely edit out. Like, that's where it starts. And then it takes a turn. Like totally, but it was also unnecessary. That's not the relationship that I'm coming to watch in a movie about Dracula and Renfield. I'm looking for that relationship. So I'm glad that they cut it, but it shouldn't have been there in the first place. And it's clear that they didn't really know how to bring her into the fold and like continue the story. So like there are still the elements of that. So I won't go deep into the editing thing, but like it just like that made the movie feel so much longer and like confusing. I just really wanted more of Renfield and Dracula together. That's
Absolutely.
what I needed. Another huge as Nikisha mentioned before, the gore in this movie is insane. But it's like so over the top silly that it was more funny and entertaining. Because the whole context of this movie is not believable. But I was still having a really great time, when they're ripping limbs off and then using them to stab other people. It was funny. I thought it was hysterical. I was cackling in the movie theater because it was just it was so over the top of the CG blood gooing and weird non it didn't respond to gravity. But I was like, you know what, whatever. This is the movie that I came that's the only expectation that I had was it's gonna be a weird gore fest and that's okay. I'm into that. So I feel like it gave me more or less what I wanted. I didn't need it to be better quality gore because it was just about being over the top. So that was fine for me. And then you still get the really good practical stuff of again Renfield's decomposed body slowly regaining skin and becoming back to his full form. So they do pay attention to the details in other places where I do think it's important. So I think that the gore is its own point. And I love that X-ray kick. I think I cried laughing so hard. I just was not expecting that at all.
Jamie, we're now calling it the Bones fart kick here on Talking Horror.
I'm gonna have a coughing fit. The Bones fart kick was so good. And I also like didn't remember that Ben Schwartz was in this. I really liked him in this. I feel like there's more that he could have done, but like he has his moments of riffing that I think are pretty funny and clever. I don't really understand his mom in this movie at all. And then Awkwafina, I don't know. I have really mixed feelings about Awkwafina in general.
In general, yep.
But I feel like she was really poorly utilized in this movie. Also, like I wish that there something that really took me out of it. This is totally random. But she had really awful posture in one scene, which made me feel very self-conscious about my own posture. But like, I wish that somebody would have like checked that and been like, hey, can you lean your head back a little bit?
If you're finishing at top of your class in like police academy that they mentioned, like I just don't believe that she wouldn't have a more like a body language that like
Yes.
conveyed
Like presence of body.
yeah,
maybe?
yeah, confidence or something. Like it was this weird juxtaposition where she was like hunched over, like trying not to like be herself, but also standing up to like the mafia at the
The
same
scariest,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, it was very weird.
Yeah, there
Yes.
was like weird tension between these like two personalities that didn't quite make sense. So like that like took me out of it. It was weird. But yeah, I agree, Brian. I think that's like part of why I was like, why I don't understand this version of you. And then the sister thing like felt totally unnecessary. So there's just
Totally.
like there's a lot going on in this movie, but at its core, this relationship between Renfield and Dracula and them just, bloodying up everybody around them, like if you want that, like you will get that. You'll get a lot of
Mhm.
other stuff, but you will get that.
Yeah, that's great. Totally agree. Like I didn't even mention Aquafina or the sister thing because it wasn't relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what does this have to do with anything? I like don't even care.
I don't even care. And it's, because Aquafina, I guess, is the comedy person or like the comedy side character or sidekick.
But you had two.
Exactly. So the thing is like, why would you bring her in or this character in? Because you've already filled that slot of like the kooky sidekick or whatever the case may be, and then you want to add her into it, and it just is like a hat on top of a hat on top of a hat. Like you don't need it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's too many hats.
it's
That
too
is
many hats.
Far too many hats.
You don't need it.
No, you only need
Take
one
it
hat.
off.
Sometimes you don't even need a hat. It's just nice to get like put a little bit of sunscreen on, and you don't need the
Sun
hat.
on your head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Totally.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Brian, do you want to
Yeah.
continue on with our likes and gripes?
Sure, I'll go quickly. I'm going to start with my gripes. Because I will just preface this with, despite all of the gripes I'm about to go through, and it might like get me passionate about this movie, I had a great time. Like for an hour and a half, Jamie and I had an absolute blast. But I agree with you, Nikisha. Like this is a one and done for me.
Yeah.
But like, I had a really fun time sitting there for an hour and a half. And actually, I liked the movie a lot. Like the day afterwards, but the more I got further away from my viewing experience, the more all of these gripes crept into my head, if that makes sense. So, here's some of my gripes. I completely agree with Jamie that we just needed more Dracula Renfield combination. That's where the movie was great. Also, if you're gonna take place in New Orleans, feature New Orleans more. This could have
Oh my
taken place
God. yes.
anywhere.
What a waste of a location.
Yeah, like it was the only thing that was really New Orleans was that restaurant, but like that could have been a New Orleans themed restaurant in any city. So that
Even like cafe, like they say, yeah, we're meeting at Cafe Du Monde, and it doesn't even like
Show me a
the
beignet.
whole-
I want beignets.
yeah, I also don't even think that like that exterior was like maybe they rebuilt it since I've been there, but like Cafe Du
didn't look
Monde,
like it.
no, it's like under a tent, or at least the original one.
Yeah.
So you have that stuff. That actually bothered me a lot. Like use New Orleans. Nicolas Cage loves New Orleans. He lives there. He bought plot
He has
there.
a weird.
Yeah.
Doesn't he have that weird place that
Pyramid?
he wants to be buried?
Yeah, the pyramid plot. Anyway, so there's
We
that.
visited it.
We did.
We went to it.
New Orleans is awesome. Like if you've never been, go. Yeah, that's it.
Great food.
Great spooky
All the
tours.
good
We did a lot of
Weird
spooky tours.
cemeteries. Yeah.
Oh
we
yeah,
did
you got to do the
self-tours.
cemetery tours.
You have to.
They're wonderful.
Yeah.
They're wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also think that this movie feels like it was written to death, rewritten to death. Excuse me, like because it feels like at one point it was written where like Renfield actually falls in love with this cop character, and like they get, and like that's like, and like that's fine if the characters had chemistry, but you could see that they had to cut things like at the end. And
Can I interrupt you really quickly?
sure,
This movie not only feels like that, but it feels like it was written like 10 years ago.
yeah,
The ska joke.
yeah.
That like big ska joke. I was like, what is the point of this? Like who's gonna find this funny? I found it funny because as a middle schooler, like my town loved ska. So
Yes.
like I thought it was really funny. But like who
It's
is
not
me?
relevant.
No one else is me.
Also,
this doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Why is this funny?
And a ska joke in New Orleans felt like it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I guess you could have framed it better, or like New Orleans people from New Orleans are like offended by ska, but like I never got that feeling from it. I don't know. I agree
No.
with you completely.
No,
Yeah.
that was it.
No, totally true. Jamie mentioned it introducing a lot of ideas that never materialized. They kept talking about how he left his daughter and wife, back in the day. I was just surprised we never got a plot line where he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go find my daughter," or at least have some side of, or not daughter, but it would be like great granddaughter or something like that. Also, like just the love interest in general, and there were some other things that they had mentioned, the mafia mentioned along the way that like that they didn't materialize, which I thought was weird. Or at least it wasn't used thematically enough for me not to think it was a plot point.
Yeah.
And then I think that this movie, this is a like and a gripe. I think this movie's pacing is too fast. I think that the like is that like it moved, it clipped, like we got to an hour and a half. The gripe is it never gave you time as an audience member to breathe. It never let character moments land. It never let jokes at the end of scenes land. So like it was like Awkwafina joke, cut to next scene. Renfield joke, cut to next scene, as opposed to like, okay, now I'm into it. It's kind of like a musical not letting you clap after a song. But you know what I mean?
Kind of like
How
Hamilton,
dare
but
they?
You can't.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes you have to because the idea is you don't want to clap there. But like, like it's like when it's done like maliciously in some ways.
Yes.
So you like
I
that.
love it.
I thought that some of the action was hard to follow, and I think this was edited weird. In some places, in other places, it was very clear. So it was just dependent on the moment. I thought it was a little slow in the middle. In general, I think it was just a lot of like plot here, everyone goes here, everyone goes there, everyone goes here, everyone goes there, and then you get to some gore, and you're like, cool, okay, I'm in for the gore, which was great. And then my number one, I agree with Jamie. I call this trailer failure, where like the trailer just like the trailer should set tone, not tell me everything about the movie, but this one kind of did. And if you noticed, in the credit sequence, they showed like screenshots, like freeze frames of the movie. There seemed like there was a musical number, a dancing number in there. Nicholas Hoult was like in like, like jeté position and whatnot. It was just like, it was super weird. And he recently released on his Twitter and his social media, there was a cut musical scene. After he kills everybody and saves Awkwafina in that restaurant at the beginning. Jackie Wilson's higher your love keeps lifting me higher and higher plays while he does this like big dance number in the middle of like one of the New Orleans streets, which I would have liked in the movie because I think that would have been funny and enjoyable.
Yes.
But in hindsight, because they had no chemistry and they didn't end up as a couple together, it doesn't make sense that he would do this like big love dance. So to me, that goes to show you that the editor tried their best to try and get rid of all the love stuff without having to do reshoots. So that was a gripe in general because I wanted it, but it's also a like because like they knew what they were doing. Quickly,
Was it a good dance sequence?
Yeah, it
that
was
you
super
watched?
fun, absolutely. And then he like shakes his head and he's like, "Oh, no one was actually dancing with me. Oh well, I'll just keep walking." But I thought the movie was fun. I thought it was really funny and clever in places. I thought the performance. I thought weirdly, this is a movie that you would think that everyone phoned it in. I don't think anybody phoned it into this one. Maybe Awkwafina, but I don't think that's her fault. I think she was put in a position to not succeed. I don't blame her at all.
Exactly. Yes.
I think that the camp in this movie is spectacular. I love that we talked about this honoring the universal monsters. I like how over the head this was with its thematic elements. I like that it wasn't like subtly trying to do it. It was in your face completely. Like, I'm totally fine with that. Dependability, inner strength, inspiration, support, toxic relationships, bone fart kick.
Bone fart kick.
Yeah, obviously.
It makes me laugh every time.
But to me, the number one like of this movie. Oh, another gripe is that Ashdashalu, I'm so sorry, I'm butchering her name. She's an amazing actress. She got done dirty in this movie. She doesn't do anything. She stands there. She's so much better than the material they gave her.
Yes.
Yeah. I kept expecting something bigger to happen
Me
with
too.
her, and then it never did. But
Nothing.
Yeah. But my number one like of this movie, by far, leaps and bounds, is not Nicolas Cage's Dracula. Is not how lovely Nicholas Hoult was as Renfield. It is Brandon Scott Jones, as Jamie mentioned, as the support group leader. He made me laugh every single time. The clip that I usually put in episodes in the audio version of our episodes, like absolutely the beginning of this episode put that. The like that's just that, I think that's my favorite moment from the movie. And truthfully, right now, the two movie moments that have to do with like dialogue or something at the top of my list for 2023 are this one and Megan singing Titanium. Like,
Yeah.
just always give me those good feels for whatever reasons. But
Absolutely.
and I don't have any quotes because I just didn't write anything down. But just really the bone fart
You
kick.
don't have I am enough.
I am enough.
Brian?
I am enough. Bone
I
fart
am
kick.
enough.
Yeah.
And bone fart kick. Beautiful. Well, speaking about I am enough, let's get into this mental health with our brains section. So yeah, I mean, it was just the whole group therapy session in general, just because you could feel the support from the group leader, as well as him just being his comedic timing was just wonderful. It was just nice to see that kind of support. But like Brian said, the themes in here were, they scream them in your face, and they always talk about these two words, codependence and narcissist. So Jamie, let's define these terms, and I would love your opinion on how these were portrayed in the movie, if you thought that they did a good job portraying the dynamics of a codependent and a narcissist relationship.
Yeah, so I think what they are trying to get at is that characteristics of like so I'm going to separate the person from the thing because I pay attention to language, and I didn't say this as a gripe because I know we're going to talk about this right now, but I don't like that they call the self-help group, like they call themselves codependents.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people are not like their, mental illnesses or like those kinds of things. Like people experience these things, like people have anxiety, but like I'm not going to, maybe I will say I'm an anxious person, but or like that my anxiety defines me. Like, so I have a problem with like they are codependent. So I'm going to say characteristics of people who might have codependent characteristics, whatever. This like sense of responsibility for others. Like it's like very people pleasery. Like, but like to the extreme. I mean, people pleasing already isn't necessarily the best or the most healthy because it is doing things for others to like prioritize others' needs over your own, which I think is also what's at the core. And just like it then creates this unhealthy dependence on someone else. I think the fear and like anxiety about being alone is then fueling like being in this relationship dynamic that is not healthy. To avoid being abandoned. This like extreme need for approval, feeling guilty if they try to like set a boundary or advocate for themselves in any way. So I think those are some of the themes that we also like see in the movie with Renfield too.
Do you think, sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that codependence kind of would naturally fall into relationships with narcissists? Like, are they more likely to be in a relationship with a narcissist because of how they operate?
That's a great question. I think that this is why I separate the person from like the characteristics, because I think that I think it depends. Like, I think there's so many different factors that play into like, because on the, like, so let me say what a narcissist is first.
Yes.
Or what narcissistic. See, I just did it myself. I got to catch myself. It's all about the unlearning, folks. But narcissistic characteristics is like this high, like very high ego, inflated sense of self. They want like attention from other people and have very low empathy and compassion for others. But at the very core, like there's so many layers of that you're getting. At the very core, which often you might never see, is this like extreme low self-worth. That's what fuels seeking like attention from others and this inflated sense of self. It's actually at its core like can't handle criticism and you know, don't feel that self-worth.
Yeah.
So in terms of like a relationship dynamic, I think that there's folks who like, you know, fear abandonment, who might have a more like anxious attachment style. So like we've talked about attachment styles before. You know, folks who feel maybe very insecure in relationships, who might pour a lot of themselves into a relationship because of that fear of abandonment. And then if their partner potentially has narcissistic characteristics, that then can pose this like really unhealthy relationship dynamic where like there's this power imbalance. And that's where I think like it can be really harmful. And like I think that, you know, folks who maybe are more self-aware and like have been doing work on themselves might even be aware of these characteristics and try to like be mindful of them, both the person who might like have a more anxious attachment and like their partner potentially. So like I think that it's possible for somebody to be, you know, to have codependent characteristics and then like still pursue healthy relationships.
Of course, yeah.
But I think that like there certainly are people that take advantage, and not even necessarily folks who have narcissistic characteristics, but just like in general. Because like, you know, who wouldn't want, and I don't mean this in like a mean way, but like, you know, if you have a partner who's like constantly self-sacrificing, it's like sometimes that feels good, but like you have to also recognize this pattern, this moment where it's like going beyond, and it's like you're doing too much. Like I'm not the most important person in your life. Like you have to be the most important person in your life. And like when it feels like the other person is taking up so much space, like what is your like check for that? Like how do you pause and be like, oh, I've like poured myself into this other person, but like I'm not spending enough time on myself.
Right, exactly. Because you need that space.
Yeah. But what I really think is so like that's that. I think that I'm very curious on like what their ideas were at the core of this movie, because like it's clear that that's that like it's, you know, Renfield is initially being portrayed as this person who's like putting all of his energy into somebody else, and then Dracula is, you know, a narcissist with a huge ego and like is so, but I don't think that, yeah, I think he's a narcissist anyway.
Yes.
But it's like obviously Renfield's being taken advantage of in many ways for a lot of different reasons. But I think that my problem is like what I see in this support group is it's less about, I think it's just like abusive relationships at its core.
Yes.
And I don't know why they like didn't want to talk about it from that perspective. I feel like it's weird to frame it as like codependency. That like confused me. Like that's why I'm like, what was the point? Like obviously the point of this movie is to showcase this relationship between the two.
Yes.
But it's like, how do you then like bring this to contemporary times, and like what's the point that you're trying to achieve? And that was my biggest question of like, why are they calling it codependent support group? Why aren't they calling it like, you know, like survivors of like
of abuse?
You know, yeah,
Yes.
I thought that was weird, and I was like, maybe they don't want it to be too focused on abuse because like that might turn people away, and then they might not want to see the movie, and so maybe this was their way of like, you know, branching out to the most amount of people like audience wise who would be interested. But I just found it, and I get it again because the point is that like it's talking about the relationship, but you can still talk about, because there's so many different relationships that people were clearly bringing into that group.
Yes.
And because their relationship, like Renfield and Dracula's, is unique. They don't have a romantic relationship.
Sure.
So
Right.
like, but there's other forms of like abuse and power and control that are being exerted within their relationship dynamic that you can still talk about. And I felt like the codependent thing didn't quite make sense because at at later on when it's like, we'll talk about like Dracula saying that he's the victim, but like, you know, when Renfield himself is like reflecting on abandoning his family and like doing things because he selfishly wanted these things, then it feels like it undermines the point that he joined this like codependency support group, because now you're just like, oh, you pursued these things anyway. It's not just about the relationship with Dracula, but like you wanted things. You actually wanted to take advantage of Dracula, not knowing that he was a vampire, but like that was your goal, was to, you know, to make some quick and easy money because like you wanted it. Then you abandoned your family to like continue to pursue this goal of power, but like that doesn't really have anything to do with codependency. I don't know. Am I going on a tangent?
Well,
but like,
no.
there's something about it that doesn't quite make sense to me.
Sure, I don't know the answer to this, but can't codependency also not necessarily have to be a negative thing? Like, can't you be codependent on someone else, but like it's consensual and you're like totally okay with the fact that you rely on somebody else and they rely on you? You know what I mean? Like, or no, am I totally misconstruing the meaning behind that?
I mean, I think that like, I think that like from a clinical perspective, codependency is seen as a negative thing.
Okay.
I think that like you're talking generally about like
a healthy relationship. Yeah.
Like there can be like certainly like a healthy relationship where like people are have like a positive sense of self and self-worth and aren't looking externally to you know feel that sense of value. Like they can still depend on a partner and like that's based in mutual trust, mutual vulnerability. It's not like it's not one-sided or like emotionally abusive where it's like, oh, now I have this power over you because like you asked me for help and like you need me and like you have to rely on me. It's like, no, like there's this mutual respect where it's like, of course you can rely on me for this, but like that's just normal because I love you and I care about you and like I want you to be able to trust me and lean on me when you need to, but not in like not in a manipulative way.
Sure.
Right. And not in just a one-sided way. It's always just going to be the both of you putting forth a mutual effort as opposed to just codependency as one, it kind of is doing
it's just
more
like
than
a
the
power
other.
imbalance in a
Yeah.
relationship.
Before we switch over to that amazing Renfield Dracula scene that we'll talk about in terms of victim flipping or whatever the definition of that is, I have a question. I just wanted to say something quickly that I related to this movie. The way that I jumped into this movie and relating to it is not through like a codependency thing or not that. To me, this movie screamed work-life balance. And like in terms of like he lost his family because he spent too much time at work, in terms of like an underlying theme, you know, he wasn't able to separate like his home life, just like having a nice like bright interior with a fun welcome mat, with like the demands of his boss and the boss having no boundaries and him wanting boundaries. That's where so then the codependency stuff always was a little bit like weird to me, because even though like yes that seeps in absolutely because he gave him the power, because he really can't escape from it. But I kind of jumped in on it from I understand, like managing your work-life balance is like a really hard thing in the contemporary world, especially because we have our phones on us all the time. Like Dracula can literally see into his mind where he is and stuff like that. So like that's kind of like checking your email in some ways in a crazy way. Like that's how I related to it, and so the codependency thing also just like was a little bit shaky for me in general, but you know, and you could still have a toxic relationship with your boss without it being codependent.
Even I think that people would have related to this movie if they called it like a toxic relationship support group, because everyone has had toxic relationships of all kinds, and you can then kind of like go from there. The codependency thing, something just like didn't quite click for me. But I think that you're right. I think that like that's a perfect like connection to what's going on, is like, I mean, I think especially during the pandemic, that separation between work and personal is so much harder, and like, you know, like being taken advantage of in a lot of ways. I think like folks have shared that, and like because what else are we doing, right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, I know you're home and I know you're not doing anything, so you might as well just do more work.
Yeah, right. Gosh, no, I mean that's a really
So don't
good.
be a bad boss,
Don't
or
be a bad
we'll yell
boss.
at you.
Exactly.
Whoa.
But or Dracula will come and,
And eat your
rip off all
face.
your limbs. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've mentioned it so many times, so let's get into it. And that's the great scene between Dracula and Renfield when Dracula is basically saying that Renfield is not the victim, Dracula is the victim, and then Renfield just pulls out the How to Talk to a Narcissist book,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was hilarious. But my question to you, Jamie, is how would you approach that conversation if someone were to come at you and say that they are the victim when they're actually the narcissist? Like how do you verbally combat that?
Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked about gaslighting before on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast, but what a great example. Um,
Yeah.
That's
so
my
Ooh.
least favorite
gaslighting
type of lighting, just to let everyone know.
is
Yeah, I like
gaslighting.
ring
Yeah.
lights, I like
Except for the really
spotlights.
nice ones, that are like outside of people's like lovely
Oh,
real
like
homes. I do
gaslighting.
like that
Ooh.
gaslighting.
Gaslighting is beautiful. Like it's probably very dangerous because like of the gas lines, but like it just feels so old-timey as a
But
charm
yes.
to it. It's kind of like to me gaslights are kind of like the twinkle lights of the turn of the century, you know what I mean?
Oh my
Oh, I
gosh.
know you love a twinkle light.
Uh
You got to put some in your parlor for your parlor
it's,
room
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't want the gas lines going in there. Maybe on the outside, and we'll put twinkle lights
on the
on
outside.
the like where the
Mm-hmm.
ceiling meets the walls and around. Anyway, sorry, I'm just getting
Mm-hmm.
too much into it.
HGTV.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Sorry, but
Um,
yes, Jamie, gaslighting.
gaslighting. Yeah, I mean, like it's just it's just another tool to manipulate Renfield, but I think also is like, in the context of this codependent relationship, when one person then is like trying to take back their power, it's like an affront to the abuser. So that's why he's able to frame like, oh, you're abandoning me, you're like leaving me without any food, you're leaving me,
Mm,
as this affront, because this is Renfield trying to take back his power from being like abused all these years, and he's framing the, what otherwise are like very normal things that Renfield is doing to like separate and disentangle himself. Dracula is framing as these negative things, because ultimately like it is harming him because he's losing the person that he's been victimizing all this time.
mm,
So like he might be very well, like it's both manipulative, but also like because of his own perception of the relationship, he might be viewing himself as a victim, but it also
mm-hmm.
sounds like he's just trying to be manipulative and use Renfield and the support group's language against Renfield to like then further guilt trip. As I mentioned, one of the characteristics, like feeling guilty when advocating for yourself and asserting yourself, like he's using
Absolutely.
this language
Sure.
to then make Renfield feel worse about going through the process of trying to, like create his own life.
I mean, and that's just you saying that just all like clicked in my brain because of course Dracula can like hear and see his thoughts. So the fact that Dracula could sit in those sessions to use that language against him, like,
It's
is
messed up.
really, really messed up.
Yeah.
To be able to kind of I mean, in that situation, like, what would be the best out, to try? I mean,
I mean, against
people in those,
Dracula, I don't know, but
well, yes.
Fair.
it
Excellent point.
it really depends. It really depends on the relationship, because like it depends. Like if this is like intimate partner violence, like there's a lot of risk there. Like, and by risk I
Mm,
mean like safety, like you know threat of death
yeah,
in trying to leave, and like that's very real. And so like it's not as easy to say like just leave,
right.
or
For
even
sure,
to
for
say
sure.
like that there's one definitive right way. One technique, if there isn't like the threat of imminent danger, um that I really like, and I forget where I first heard about it. It may honestly be a TikTok, but it's
Mhm.
called the gray rock method. And
Okay.
basically this is like the this is the antithesis to narcissistic traits, where the idea is that you deliberately act unengaged, as unresponsive as you can, as boring as a gray rock. And like that disengagement is like you're not feeding into what this like toxic person wants from
Yes.
you, and you're not like showing them the emotion. They won't get like that thrill out of like, you know, continuing to perpetuate harm.
Yes.
And you know, that could potentially diffuse that tension. But again, that's not like 100% of the time. It's not always safe to do so.
Hmm.
You have to, you know, there's context involved, but like that is one tool that can work for like certain friendships, or like even, you know, toxic relationships with coworkers,
Hmm.
family members, things like that. So it depends, but that's one.
Yeah. Are you talking about that TikTok? Well, there is a TikTok of old girl from 50 Shades of Grey, and there it's a movie. I don't know what movie it is, but she's sitting there. They're like at a coffee table, and the framing was that he was a narcissist and saying like, "I want to break up with you," and she's just like, "Okay." And then he kind of goes off into this tangent because she's being so calm about everything. And that just, you describing that just reminded me of that video circulating around, but just literally seeing like how this narcissist was falling apart because she was not engaging with him at all in begging for him to stay, or even just showing kind of sadness for leaving. She was just she was very calm, and then he was just, you know, going crazy and yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a great, you said it's called the gray rock?
The gray rock method.
Method.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
If you ever forget what you're supposed to do, just remember, be as boring as a gray rock, but like you're giving short, like very short answers to questions, like, you know, no emotions, like you're just disconnected and like focusing on something else.
Geologists are deeply offended by this.
Oh, God.
Gray rocks are not boring to them.
Sorry, geologists.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, that's great. I think you hit like a lot of great things in this section. So thank you for all of that wonderful information. Jamie also has her own therapist Instagram page. Jamie, share that with the people so they can see all of your wonderful knowledge. She be sharing all the great things on there.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a reminder that I need to schedule my content for this week. I think it's at Jamie Steiner Therapy.
Jamie
on
Steiner
Instagram.
Therapy. Beautiful. Follow it. She posts lovely things, lovely reminders. Yeah, and if you need assistance on, you know, trying to find other therapists and such, maybe Jamie could be your resource. So follow her page. Wonderful gowns, beautiful gowns. Grand. Shall we go into the Rotten Tomatoes?
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Yeah, let's do Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think this has on Rotten
Rot it
Tomatoes? Rot it up.
Write it up. I love that. I want to say 70. I'll go 70.
All right, Jamie.
I'm going to say 64.
All right. You're both over. This movie has a 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the critics' consensus is, although it fails to take full advantage of its committed stars and killer premise, Renfield's batty horror comedy blend sinks in just enough to leave an impression.
Okay.
However, the audience score is 79%, which feels more right. And the audience says, you'll enjoy Renfield more if you're ready for a lot of campy humor, but why else would you be watching a Nicolas Cage vampire movie?
Exactly.
I think I think
Exactly.
I think I dig that one a little bit more than the other one.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
And the cast is great, but except for just the whole Awkwafina thing.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
It's just a bummer.
I think this movie
for her.
could have really been elevated had they cast that part a little bit more appropriately.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Or just didn't have to force like a love.
Yeah,
story.
one or the
I
other.
don't know why.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like,
Right.
Get over it. That's not the point. That's not why we're here.
Yeah.
Right. Don't need it.
All
Grand.
right. should we get into the 4 S's?
Yeah.
Yeses.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horror's 4 S's.
I almost forgot that we didn't do that.
All right. The 4 S's are skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. Skulls is how well you think this dealt with mental health and human behavior on a scale of 1 to 10. Scale of 1 to 10 for scares, how scary was this? And then 1 to 10 shakes, how much will this stay with you? Is this a one and done movie? And then suggestions, what would you suggest with this movie? Nikisha, let's start with you.
Yeah, I left my skulls blank because I wanted to hear what Jamie had to say truly about, how she felt about how this was portrayed and were the people peopling, especially in the therapy sessions with the language and
Sure.
how they approached the relationship. So I think after our conversation, I would give it a 3, mostly because of what Jamie was talking about with not calling it codependency group and it being just like a different dynamic because like what is the goal here of their relationship. So I'll give that a 3. Scares, I'll give it a 1. It wasn't scary, but the gore was fantastic. And then shakes, I'll give it a 3 as well. It's like I said before, a one and done, but a fun time I did have.
Sure. Jamie?
I don't know why I said
Do we
it like
need
that.
a new score for like, did you like this? Like,
Right, that's fair.
Yeah.
something
I
to
mean,
think
yeah.
about.
Yeah.
For skulls, yeah, I gave it a 4. I think that like there were some. It's confusing again because of the editing, but like I think at its core there were a lot of people doing like general people. I think that Renfield and Dracula are like both acting how I feel like they would act for the most part. Some moments not so much, but not terribly so. For scares, I gave it a 2. It's not like jump scary, but I gave it those points for each limb that was then like used to attack people
Oh,
with,
yes.
To
ripped
stab.
off and then
Yes.
to stab.
Or the head being punched off at the beginning.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
God.
really nothing beats bone fart kick.
Right, absolutely.
Nothing.
Dude, very important.
For shakes, I'm giving this a 3. I'm squinting because I don't know if I want to keep it at a 3, but I think I'm going to give it a 3. I'm still thinking about it, mostly because I've been thinking about it in anticipation of recording this episode. But like, I don't know, it's not. I don't think it's really going to like stand out forever in my brain, and but I also don't know if I'll ever like want to watch this again. Maybe I will. I don't. For now, it's a one and done, but maybe I'll change my mind in the future.
Yeah.
Sure. I gave this a 5 for skulls because I think it starts a good amount of conversation, but I don't think it goes past the halfway point because of all the things we talked about. Scares, I gave it a 2 for the exact same reasons as you all. And then shakes, I also gave it a 5. I'm also more casual with my shakes number than everyone else here. But I gave it a 5 because at its core, I will remember the 2 lead performances. And
Fair.
this portrayal of Dracula is crazy fun. I think he's a good Renfield. I'll forget the movie maybe, but I won't forget the performances. The plot, I mean, but I won't forget the performances. So I'm going to go with a 5 there. But again, I really enjoyed this. I had a great time in the movie theater. I think that also helps that 5 too. Cool. Suggestions. I'm going to start. Watch 1931's Dracula. That's it. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this movie. I wonder if you guys have seen it. Dark Shadows with Johnny
Oh,
Depp.
it's terrible.
Oh, it's terrible?
Yeah.
Great.
It's
I was just trying to
not
find
good.
funny, vampire-y
So
things.
perfect.
But
Nikisha, watch the What We Do in the Shadows movie.
okay.
And then watch the TV show. So I'm gifting you What We Do in the Shadows.
Great. I will take it. That'll be my suggestion. Jamie, what about you?
I stayed in the vampire lane,
Woo woo.
but different direction. Whoop whoop! I'm the conductor, baby. I have 2. The Lost Boys, only because we passed a skate park recently near our home, and I was like, oh, this reminds me of like some kind of like late 80s like dingy vibe, and Brian was like, oh, the Lost Boys, and I was like, yep, and now that's all I've been thinking about. And then Let the Right One In for an excellent vampire movie. It's not in English, but do not confuse this with the English language shot for shot